Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Art of the Possible series. I'm Nihali Niyogi. I'm a Principal Cloud Solution Architect at Microsoft. Today's topic is securely using Azure AI Studio's Playground to chat with your data. This is an exciting new feature that got released recently. Today, I have Meera Kurup, who is a product manager with our Azure AI Studio team. Welcome, Meera, and happy to have you on the session today. And Mira is going to talk about this exciting new feature. So I'll do an architecture walkthrough after. So over to you, Mira.
Awesome. Thank you, Nahali. Hi, everyone. My name is Meera Kurup, and I'm the product manager, as Nahali mentioned, for Azure AI Studio. So I can actually go ahead and start sharing my screen and give a quick overview of some important knowledge you can get about Azure AI Studio and how we're an enterprise-ready product and how to secure your AI workloads. Awesome. So if you didn't know, here's Azure AI Studio, a unified platform for developing and deploying generative AI applications responsibly. The platform is a one-stop shop to explore, build, test, deploy, and manage AI solutions using state-of-the-art tools grounded in responsible AI practices. Azure AI enables developers to shape the future with AI. AI Studio is a unified platform and a great way to modernize and build AI applications at scale. Developers can build multi-agent copilots using out-of-the-box and customizable templates and models. Azure AI Search can chunk, index, and store vector embeddings from any data source. With a comprehensive model catalog, developers can select from a wide range of foundation and open models. They can create and evaluate prompt flows with LLM ops, customize models, and scale proof of concepts, or POCs, into full production with continuous monitoring and refinement. And so, here's some more details, a little bit more about how we have these cutting edge models and APIs, a complete AI tool chain, responsible AI practices. And what we'll focus on today will be enterprise grade production at scale, where we have self-serve experimentation, scaling models, flows, and apps, collaborating for app monitoring, and securing assets with leading privacy and security. That last bullet point is what we'll get into today, and what we call as our enterprise promises. What does it take for a product to be enterprise ready? Well, we think of enterprise readiness in these buckets that we have here. In particular, today we'll be looking at network isolation with managed virtual network and private link. But in addition, for enterprise promises for Azure AI Studio, we also have identity and access control, data protection, policies and monitoring enabled, planning and deployment, platform trust, and cost management. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and start a little bit deeper into network isolations and identity and encryption. These are the three main aspects of enterprise readiness that all come into play in Azure AI Studio. So with networking, we can start by provisioning a workspace with something called managed VNET or managed virtual networks. With managed virtual networks, you can secure your AI resources and your computes that are be running those AI workloads. And you can secure them using approved outbound or internet outbound mode. We'll get into a little bit more details in a second. You can also establish private endpoint connections from your virtual network and use compute instance enterprise features for cost and security governance. This also ties in very closely with identity and encryption. And with identity, you can select either workspace system or user assigned identity to secure your workloads, along with user credentials to access your workspace and to your storage accounts. You can also create connections to AI services, Azure OpenAI, and AI Search with Microsoft Entra ID authentication, the most secure type of authentication for your services. And finally comes into play encryption, where we have CMK, which is customer managed key encryption, that you can allow for all of your data that is moving within your AI workspaces in your AI studio. Awesome. We'll dive a little bit deeper really quickly into managed network isolations or managed virtual networks. So managed virtual networks and network isolation streamlines your network isolation experience and speeds up your setup and frees IT from the hassles of virtual network management. As you know, setting up a virtual network is quite a complicated process, beginning with inbound to your workspace or to your Azure AI Studio, and then outbound to the internet. And so what managed network isolation is doing is clarifying that process, specifically outbound access. So we have these two offerings, private with internet outbound and private with approved outbound. The difference here being private with internet outbound restricts outbound data movement, unrestricts outbound data movement, while private with approved outbound restricts all outbound movement to the internet, and only certain approved targets can be made so that you can outbound access the internet for your AI workloads. Which is great for a lot of our enterprises who care a lot about what their internal teams are doing with the outbound access, and they only have certain links and URLs that they'd want to have their teams using and accessing on the internet. On top of that, inbound access is also secured as well with a public network access flag and with private endpoint access. Managed network isolation allows for a faster and streamlined setup, operating with automated network configurations and a much simpler architecture, and enjoying end-to-end private IP setup and protection from data exfiltration. And so now I'm going to walk through with Nahali. I'll hand it over to her, the architecture, to explain how to set up a networking environment within Azure AI Studio. On to you, Nahali.
Thank you, Meera. Great presentation. So this is our Azure documentation for securing data with AI Studio Playground. And today's topic, like Meera mentioned specifically, we're going to talk about network access. And in the future video, we'll talk about RBAC, role-based access control, and Entra ID as well. And then another important piece of documentation is where we talk about network isolation modes. Have two network isolation modes, which are very, very similar. And the differences are listed over here. So I just wanted to call out the biggest difference is between the two isolation modes that Meera mentioned, the approved outbound and allow internet outbound. Again, allow internet outbound, think of it as unrestricted outbound access. That's the key. All of the differences are listed over here, right? So with that, I'm going to go back to my architecture diagram so we can walk through the scenarios. So what you see on my screen is a hybrid cloud architecture. If you've been following along with me in this series, this will look familiar to you. We start with some sort of Azure presence. We start with an on-prem data center connected to Azure using express route connectivity. And of course, at the top, we're showing that there are some existing PaaS services that the customer has. So more of a brownfield environment, there's already presence in Azure. And so coming back to today's topic, we're going to deploy AI PaaS services. And when we deploy AI Studio, it deploys a bunch of PaaS services, right? So again, the option that is of interest for today, and let me just make sure I highlight that here. And these are the two options of interest. They're very similar. However, today we are going to specifically focus on the last option, a private with approved outbound. Okay, so when you deploy the AI Studio, and I'm going to jump between a little bit between the portal and this Draw IO architecture for a full experience. But when you deploy AI Studio, and I'll take you in the AI Studio just to show what it looks like. So when you deploy it, what behind the scene it does is it creates, let me show you the different PaaS services that gets created. So in the deployment experience, you need to create an AI service. There is a storage account, key vault, container registry, and app insights. There's a bunch of PaaS services that get created. And then from a networking option perspective, we're going to choose this private with approved outbound. Okay, so this is just what the portal looks like. And then let's go back into the envisioning piece. So now when you deploy it, you will notice that the behind the scene, when you deploy the AI Studio Hub, it deploys all of these PaaS services. And this is the AI service. I just want to make the differentiation between the AI service and AI Studio Hub over here. So when you deploy it in this private with approved outbound mode, what happens is that there is no access to the user, the external user, to these services, right? So the only way to access this is to drop a private endpoint. So let's project a private endpoint into the customer's VNet. Notice that this pink box is a subnet inside the customer's VNet. So with this private endpoint, the way the flows would work is this on-prem user sitting right here would over the express route connect to the studio, AI studio using this private endpoint. And likewise, the flow from this VM would also be able to route to this private endpoint. So that's a very, very basic, to start with and to access the studio. This is the first private endpoint that gets projected. With that, I'm going to pause over here. Meera, any comments over here so far?
No, this looks great. It's just ensuring that you have that initial private endpoint created from your hub or custom VNet to the Azure AI Studio hub and project. To the hub itself, I'll also clarify here that all networking settings, encryption identity as well, those are all set on the hub level. And so a hub is like the overarching kind of setup area. This is where a lot of IT admins are located. And again, where all the networking is set up. And then an IT admin can create individual projects that the AI developers can use and create from, and all of the networking and settings that are described in the hub go to the product as well. So we're looking mainly at the hub level. That's what we're looking at when it comes to networking settings. But yeah, that makes sense.
Excellent. Thanks, Meera. Yeah, so the other thing, anytime you have private endpoint, one of the important things to note is that behind the scene, there is private DNS zones that get provisioned. So kind of jumping back just a tad bit in the portal experience, when you, like Meera said, when you project this private endpoint, there are two private DNS zones that automatically get created. So be sure that if you're accessing it from on-prem, that your DNS architecture is set up correctly. So just to show those two DNS zones, this is the private DNS zone for Azure ML.ms, and then there's another one for notebooks.azure.net, and then the other two are over here, openai.azure.com and cognitiveservices.azure.com. Okay, so those are the DNS zones that get provisioned behind the scenes. And of course, I've done full session on hybrid DNS, but just for the completeness of this video, I'll just show you that if you do have to resolve these DNS zones correctly, these records correctly from on-prem, you do have to set up, imagine, so these are kind of numbered. So from on-prem, your on-prem DNS would have a conditional forwarder to an Azure DNS, a custom DNS. It can also be done using private DNS resolver, which is our PAS service. In this diagram, I'm showing an IaaS-based custom DNS, and then there it can have a global forwarder to the Azure DNS, the 168.63 IP, and then by the virtue of VNet links, the full sort of the resolution works, right? This is, there's a deep dive video on my YouTube channel on this, so be sure to check it out if that's something of interest. So with that, let's talk more about kind of securing this AI PaaS services for bring your data. So first thing that happens is when you want to start, when you chat with the playground, you do need this AI service private endpoint projected in the customer's VNet. So this one was for the hub. This is for the AI service. Okay, so we're going to go through all of the different private endpoints next. And then next, when you provision the compute, what happens is all of these PaaS services that were deployed, all of the private endpoints for that gets projected in the managed VNet, in a subnet inside a managed VNet. So this is the compute layer that the two pink boxes are subnets within the managed VNet. So let's project those private endpoints. Now, I've color coded them because there's quite a few as we build up this design. So the blue lines over here are showing the private endpoints that are in the managed VNet. Okay, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 private endpoints in the managed VNet, and that's for the AI PaaS services. Now, kind of showing you another layer of private endpoints are these. The ones that are color coded as pink are projected in the customer's VNet. So you can also project these in the customer's VNet. Sometimes customers could have the same storage. I've shown this storage separately, but you could have the same storage that is shared by the Azure PaaS services. So far, what we have done is the blue lines are the private endpoints in the managed VNet, and these pink lines are the private endpoints in the customer's VNet. Meera, I'll pause here if you have any comments, anything you want to add more clarity for.
Definitely. So I think one thing to note here is with that private approved outbound managed VNet mode, those private endpoints are created automatically from the managed VNet to those services. So AI services, storage, Key Vault, and ACR, and of course the AI Hub itself. Those are the ones that Nihali has in blue. The ones in pink will have to be provisioned by the user from their custom VNet to those resources. And so you can go to those resources and create the private endpoint within that virtual network that the user's created. And then you have the connection networking wise set up where you have access from your VNet to those resources, as well as the managed VNet, and those computes have access to those resources as well. So that's just an extra note that I wanted to add there. Yeah.
Yeah, great point, Meera. I think that reminds me, I think this is um, like Meera mentioned, these anything that has the underbar sys. So if you going back to the portal experience, if you go to this tab under networking and workspace managed outbound access, all the blue colored boxes I have shown are the private endpoints. And like Meera mentioned, the underbar sys ones are automatically created. Just one observation to make is that sometimes you will see them shown as inactive, and they only become active after the compute is provisioned. So, so kind of the way the layers light up is once this compute is provisioned, they become active, but they're automatically done. So now another layer of private endpoints is that let's say that you have these customer has the AI search and storage PaaS services. Again, you can project those into the customer's VNet, as well as you can project those in the managed VNet. So notice the blue lines are all of the ones that are in the managed VNet. Again, pink lines are in the customer's VNet. Okay, so at this point, the way to kind of think about security here is that at this point, all of the PaaS services, so including the AI related PaaS services, the customers PaaS services, everything is nothing is now accessible through public internet. You have all of them accessible using a private endpoint. Okay, so no public access, and this is something I also want to show it to you in the portal, just for the completeness of the whole experience. So what you would see is in the portal, if you go to I'm in the AI Studio Hub. If you go to Networking tab, you'll see that public access is disabled. This is where in Meera's presentation you saw the PNA flag is disabled, and that's what this setting is. And then in the outbound access, we do have this allow only approved outbound, AOAO. Sometimes it's referred that way. And then you will see that, and I'll come back to the user defined rules in a little bit, but let me just show you the outbound rules that I mentioned. So this is how the outbound rule looks, and this is the AI hub. Let me show you. Um, all of the private endpoints I showed before. So this is the AI service. And notice that the public access is disabled, and then you'll see two private endpoints, one that is projected in the customer's VNet, and this one is in the managed VNet. Again, this is the AI services. And then let's look at the AI search. In AI search as well, public access is disabled, and then private endpoint are projected both in customers VNet as well as in managed VNet. And likewise, storage public access is disabled, and you have two private endpoints. Okay, so this is kind of the complete picture, and these were the last two private endpoints that I showed you. So this is anything else, Meera, that you want to add before we jump into the outbound access?
No, I think this is great. It covers all the default past resources and customer past resources, and just ensuring that the setup here is correct is essential. I will just add ensuring you have the right private endpoints created, because a lot of errors do come from the wrong private endpoints not being created by the user. Or so that's just one thing to note, is that ensuring you have the right private endpoints created, just as Nahali had stepped through. So, but everything else looks great.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, great point. So private endpoint and then corresponding DNS zones. So those are the key to securely chatting with your data. So this lays sort of the foundation for it. So let's talk about outbound rules next. So when you think of outbound, let me make sure that I have the right layers highlighted here. So when you think of outbound from the perspective of the compute. And so with this network isolation mode, the private with approved outbound, what happens is for anything that you want to allow, any FQDN or private endpoint that you want to connect to, you need to add rules in the outbound rules section in the portal, like I showed you earlier. Um, and just be aware of that the FQDN rules under the hood spins up an Azure firewall, so there is a cost implication for that. And then you can manually add rules for your machine learning packages like anaconda.com or docker.io or Python packages. So be sure to allow those manually in the outbound rules section. And that's the biggest difference between this third option and the middle option, is that middle option, all of these outbound access is allowed. Now let's talk a little bit about this flow. We sometimes customers do want access from compute to something on-prem. So today I've shown this flow as red. We do have something coming up, and I'm going to give you a sneak preview of that. Meera will go a little bit more into the details, but basically out of the box, if you didn't do anything, this flow is marked as red. As you know, anything red means it's not allowed. But the way to get this flow working is you could have an app gateway here, and you can project the app gateway as a private endpoint in here. Again, notice the blue line. And then the outbound access, as you see in the green flow, will work. And of course, this Artifactory or anything that you need on-prem access to is configured as a backend to the app gateway. So this is how under the architecturally it looks like. Meera is going to talk about this a little bit more. So Meera, anything else you would like to add? Anything I missed here?
No, definitely. Yeah, no, this architecture diagram is great. It kind of explains where the application gateway is set up and how this actually works with the managed VNet. Exactly what Nahali said, where we have the managed VNet, and you have a private endpoint from the managed VNet to the application gateway. So there's a correct direct private endpoint you can create. You saw in the workspace managed outbound rules, a user can create a user-defined outbound rule to an application gateway that's already created. This application gateway, though, does sit within the customer's VNet, because this allows for all of the detailed permissions, such as like what exactly we're connecting to on premises through backend pools. Those can be described within the customer's VNet. But then directly then the managed VNet also has access through the private endpoint, and the compute instance can connect to that app gateway, and then to your on-prem resources. Artifactory is just one of them. That could be an on-prem or another custom VNet resource that's maybe not located within the same custom VNet that you have your app gateway in. Any sort of resources that are outside of the bounds of the managed VNet and isn't directly supported with a private endpoint is where app gateway will come into play. So Artifactory, you can think another Snowflake database. Snowflake is used for a lot of database data storage for a lot of customers. So a Snowflake database, Nexus, etc. And I think the key here is that with this application gateway, you have an end-to-end private connection to your on-prem resources or to an Artifactory, to a Nexus repository, etc. This is something that a lot of customers have asked for, is that directly private access end-to-end from your compute instances, from your AI Studio Hub to those resources on-prem. And they are supported currently, but the full private end-to-end support has to happen with an application gateway setup. So again, the backend pools are set up so you can get those direct access to those on-prem resources, and then a front-end IP address, a private front-end IP is configured that will route that compute instance private endpoint to that application gateway. More details are coming pretty soon. This feature should be coming out in public preview by the end of October. But I'll support some more details and send it to Nahali, put the link in the bio for the details as those come out. But yeah, just a little bit more about application gateway that I wanted to add.
Excellent. That's exciting new feature, Meera. Thanks for the update on that one. So yeah, so this is so like Meera mentioned, like the key to creating this private endpoint, let me just show you in the portal along with the other outbound rules that I mentioned. So the way that gets created is it's interesting. When I did this for the first time, I was not sure where these private endpoints were getting created. So I just want to share that with you. So there are three types of destination types over here. Again, let me just redo this. So I'm in the add user-defined outbound rules. So before we were here, these are the auto-generated ones, underbar sys ones. And here it says add user-defined outbound rules, which will show up under this line item. Okay, so let's go back into the user-defined outbound rules. And here you can see that there are three different type of destination types. So if you want to create a private endpoint, let's say, for example, for the app gateway, this is the option you would choose, and then you would pick the appropriate app gateway resource type and create the private endpoint that way. Or if you want to allow FQDN, like I mentioned, Anaconda, Python, Docker, any of those FQDNs, you would create the rule using this type. So let me show you a couple that I have already created. And you'll see that I've created a bunch of rules. So this is the big difference between allow approved outbound versus allow internet outbound. You would not need to create these rules. So let me just highlight a couple here. So as you can see, this one is a good example of an FQDN based rule, and this one is a good example. I created a private endpoint for AI search, so this is a good example for private endpoint. Okay, and you can of course do the tags as well. Anything else, Meera, from the portal experience standpoint that you want to highlight here? I know there might be some new features coming up here, how you want to do this, or did I cover it all?
Definitely. So I think currently what you have here explains it great. User-defined outbound rules and required rules and allow only approved outbound mode. And then I guess maybe one quick clarification here, just in case users didn't know, is that disabled mode. I know the wording there is a little bit weird, but disabled essentially means no managed VNet is enabled, or there's no security on your or networking isolation on your AI hub. And so this would be for users who are just testing. They don't have any required networking rules. The allow internet outbound mode and the allow only approved outbound mode are for the two outbound modes and managed VNet modes that we have for securing your Azure AI hub. So that's just another note to add here. The wording can seem a little bit different, so a little bit weird. So wanted to make that clarification. As for other updates with this portal, they're coming soon. I don't want to give anything yet, but we have some few more updates coming here that'll help kind of enrich the experience with the Azure AI Hub. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Meera. Yeah, and just to kind of highlight that these two are considered more enterprise settings where you want to secure your networking. Okay, so I'm jumping back in the draw IO here. And again, all of these architectures and diagrams are, as you know, if you've been following along, shared on my GitHub repo, and the link is below. So another thing that I want to show you is, let's say that you're in the chat playground and you want to deploy to web app. Notice the web app icon gets lighted up. Again, let me do this one more time so you can see. So you could deploy from chat playground, you can deploy to web app, then you need to VNet integrate the web app. And then the flows look something like this. This user from the outside would access the web app, and the web app on the back end will talk to the AI service private endpoint, as well as the AI search, storage, any of the private endpoints that are projected over here. So this VNet integration is the key. Just for the full end-to-end experience, I wanted to show the VNet integration. And then lastly, I want to show some flows that are required for prompt flow. So if you are running prompt flow in your environment, prompt flow talks to these different private endpoints, as well as it may need some outbound, you may need to update some outbound FQDN rules for the prompt flow to work correctly. So again, you kind of go back into the user-defined rules and add anything that you need access for the packages. And so, and last but not the least, I want to show you one more flow here, which is the flow for managed online endpoint. So you can deploy this managed online endpoint, and when you deploy the managed online endpoint, you have two options. One is you can create it as a public managed online endpoint, or you could create it as a private managed online endpoint so that your users from on-prem or it can access it privately without this public. So you have two options. And again, the behind the scene, the DNS, it just creates an A record for that. So here's how you would access from on-prem into this using this private endpoint. Okay. Anything else, Meera, that you would like to add here?
No, everything else sounds great.
Awesome. So kind of jumping back, just kind of covering the for emphasis, just kind of going back into the layers, I would say that the most important takeaway over here is that if you are kind of going back to this part of our documentation, if you were going to use Azure AI Playground to securely chat with your data, um, what we covered today is all of the network bits, and all of the private endpoints have to be in the place for this to work correctly. And we'll cover this in the future videos. And then to wrap up, let me light up all of the private endpoints so you could see them all together. So this is the base private endpoint. This is for the AI service. This is for AI Studio PaaS services. Now AI Studio PaaS in customers VNet. Okay. This one was AI PaaS in the managed VNet. In the customers VNet, these are the customer PaaS private endpoints, and then these are the customer PaaS private endpoints in the managed VNet. So these are all the private endpoints lit up together. And of course, to add to the mix, you could also have the app gateway private endpoint. So with that, I'll do a quick demo before we wrap up. So let me go to, I'm going to jump onto the VM here. So think that I am right here in this VM because I can no longer access it publicly. So I'm going to jump on this VM. I'm going to access the AI Studio Hub right from there. So here I am on the AI Studio in the VM. And then let's go ahead and chat with the playground. Just want to show you that I have already created um, I've already created an index, and if you want to see this a working setup, I want to showcase this just a little bit, that you can see that I already have AI search that I'm connecting privately. We'll go into the Entra ID and auth types in the future video, but if for completeness, this for on your data to work correctly, these are the two connections that you need, the AI search and the storage account that you see over here. And then, of course, this is the OpenAI Azure AI service and Azure OpenAI service connection. And then jumping back into the chat playground, um, at this point, you can ask, how often. In my case, I've uploaded, and I'll put links to links in below for this particular PDFs that I have uploaded, and there is a full how-to on how to do that. And so when you chat with your data, it will give you these two reference documents. And again, this is all happening privately. Meera, anything else I missed?
No, I think one thing to note is, yeah, just the documentation for how to get the chat playground set up. Like as Nahali mentioned, it's not just networking. There's a few more steps that are needed. And so I think another session will go over the details of how exactly you can get the full chat playground working. But just something to keep in mind is that networking is just one piece of the entire puzzle and the picture. So definitely need to, would love a session to go over that as well too. That sounds great.
Awesome. Yeah. And just to highlight what Meera is saying, is that right here in the same documentation that, and I'll put all of these linked below, but there is an important table here. We'll go into the depth of this. There is an important table over here for role assignments here. Uh, to resources and users. And then there is another table here which shows you all the permissions that are required for developer's identity. Okay, so these two, like Meera mentioned, are also important. Networking is just one piece of it. It lays the foundation for the rest of the configuration. So with that, thank you, Meera, for joining. I appreciate your time. Amazing, awesome discussions. And I will see everyone in the next session.
Thanks, Nahali.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.